Sorry for the large gap between this video and the last video. Obviously, I'm waiting for parts, and because of COVID, there's all sorts of delays. So as you can see behind me, I've made a bit of progress, so I won't hold you up too much and we'll get straight into it. I got my friend to help me get the tires off the wheels I'll be using. This is the RMZ250 front wheel that I'll be using. And I'll be using the RMX rear wheel because I need the hub because it's the only hub that'll fit in that swing arm. But this thing is really, really crusty. I've already started trying to pull some spokes out, but a lot of the nipples are seized on the spokes. And you can just see how crusty this thing is. I'll see if I can pull these wheels apart, get the hubs powder coated most likely, and I might even have to get a new rear rim for this. So I've got the rim and the hub separated. The hub's not in too bad a shape. It obviously needs new bearings and seals, which I already have, but I'll probably get this hub painted first. I think I should be able to reuse this rim, even though it's got like a lot of corrosion on it. But I think a lot of this is mud too, so hopefully it cleans up okay. And if it does, then I can reuse this rim. I won't be able to reuse the spokes because I had to cut a lot of them because a lot of the nipples were actually seized to the spoke. So I'll have to buy a new spoke kit, which isn't too cheap, unfortunately. It's about $100 for a spoke kit. The bearings are out of the rear hub, and the rear hub is basically ready for paint, besides maybe needing sandblasting or some cleaning up. So now I'll pull apart the front wheel. The front hub and the front rim are also now ready for paint. These bearings from the front hub actually seem just fine. They're a little dirty, obviously, because I just dropped them on the workbench, but they feel fine to roll around in the hand. The seals, on the other hand, maybe need to replace those. We'll see. They're also pretty dirty, so I can't really tell the condition. The spring just fell out of that one. I've cleaned the rear brake caliper and the caliper carrier, so these things looking pretty good after just a good scrub in the parts washer. The pads that were in it are actually really good. They must have been replaced pretty recently, so I'll definitely reuse those to save some money. But I can slap this back on now. I also pulled the rear master cylinder apart and gave that a scrub and made sure all the seals and everything were okay. So this thing came out pretty good. I also used a brake clevis that I had lying around from the CRF build. Looks a bit nicer than the stamped steel one that the RMX came with. So I'll throw that back on now as well. The rear brake setup, the same, it's just the stock line, it's just been cleaned up a little bit. I managed to pick up another subframe off a 98 RM250. Hopefully this one's not bent because it cost twice the price. The new subframe doesn't appear to be bent. It seems a lot straighter than the other one, but there's one way to know for sure, and that's to put the tank and the seat on to see if the seat mount bolts line up. The tank and the seat line up really well, so I think that subframe's good. I just got another linkage rebuild kit in the mail. I guess I'll pull them out and make sure these ones fit. stands back from the powder coaters, so I'll throw that on now as well.
3 weeks later.
The hubs and rims are back from the powder coaters. The front rim and front hub are already built. I'll show you that in a second. I didn't bother filming me putting the bearings back in because it was pretty much just the same as the removal. But these came out super clean, so it's time to lace them up with some new spokes. This is the front wheel all laced up. I'm just inside now because I want to sit down while I build the rear wheel. Both wheels are done. They're laced, they're just not tightened or trued yet. I'll have to get someone who has a wheel truing stand to do that because I don't feel like investing in one. The spokes are XL spokes and they're actually stainless, so they should stay looking good for a while. And I made sure to put anti-seize on the spoke threads because the spokes obviously stainless steel and the nipples are aluminium, and those two metals like to seize together over time.
Many months later.
The wheels have been trued and obviously I've gotten tyres installed. The reason why there was such a large gap between the last video and this video is I was waiting on these tyres. There's obviously just shipping delays due to COVID. So this is a Dunlop D606. It's road legal, and this is a Pirelli MT21, also road legal, obviously because I want to ride this bike on the road as well as some off-road. I threw a new sprocket on it, and this is just the original rear disc because it's pretty good shape. I threw a new front disc on because the guy who was truing my wheels let me know that the RMZ disc that I was going to reuse was actually buckled. I thought it was okay. I couldn't really tell because I didn't have it in, anything to spin it around and see if it had a buckle. So he let me know. So I've just slapped a new one on there, and I'll throw these things on the bike now. Now that the wheels are back on the bike, it's starting to look like a real motorbike again. So I'm just gonna start throwing some other stuff on that I've had sitting around waiting for these wheels and continue on the project. Before I continue on, I'll talk about my front end setup a little bit. I'm actually using leftover CRF250R parts. So I've got this leftover master cylinder and clutch perch, as well as the levers. So I'm gonna be using those because that's what I'm used to. I really like the feel of the Honda stuff. The throttle tube is actually CR250 style or CR500 style two-stroke throttle tube. Soft compound Renthal grips with a half waffle. This is a Honda brake cable off the CRF as well. CRF brake hose holder clamp, whatever you want to call it. UFO fork guards, and this is the RMZ caliper that came with the front end that I bought, and I've just cleaned that up a bit. It's a new day, and as you saw in that last clip, I put the rear shock back in. That's basically just so I can put the bike back on the ground. That thing's gonna come back out anyway because I gotta get it rebuilt. So I'm gonna continue on and do a few other small things. I'll also mention this is actually an RM250 rear fender. This is from UFO. This is a lot shorter than the RMX rear fender, and obviously doesn't have the mounting holes for the tool bag that would have been there. This will get a tail light screwed to it anyway. This is also an RMZ front fender to suit the RMZ front end. This yellow is a bit brighter than the yellow of the tank, but I'm hoping once graphics are on the tank and the shrouds that it'll be not that noticeable that the yellow's a different color. Otherwise I might have to try and find an original Suzuki RMZ front fender and hope that it's not a different yellow like this one is. The plan for the colors on this bike is going to be black back half and yellow front half. So the front fender's obviously yellow. I have a yellow headlight, yellow bar pad, the tank's yellow. The radiator shrouds are actually black, but once the graphics are on, I'm hoping that the background will be yellow, so it'll make the radiator shrouds appear to be yellow. And then I want the seat to be like half yellow and half black. So the front half of the bike up here is all yellow and the back half is black, obviously black wheels and black fork protectors. I've modified this brake pedal a little bit. As you can see, I used a different clevis for the master cylinder, and the tip I've actually just drilled and tapped some holes in the tip of it to accept this hammerhead brake tip. This brake tip is actually off the CRF when I built it originally, but I had a crash, or I actually ran into a log and it bent the whole brake pedal. So I kept the tip and it's come in handy because now I've put it on the RMX build. You can see this is the original brake tip, which is folding, but this thing is so small in comparison, as you can see, that I'd much prefer to have a non-folding large brake pedal anyway. I've also done something similar with the RMX shifter. The original shift tip on this was just a piece of rubber that had deteriorated, so it was basically like a very thin kind of end on this thing. So I've JB welded the hammerhead shifter tip that was also on the CRF build that I also broke in similar fashion. So I've JB welded the tip on this, and it's like a much nicer, larger knurled tip on the shifter. And that's going to do it for this episode of the RMX250 build. I threw the tank and seat on so you can get a quick look at that before the next episode. So that gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. The seat cover will obviously be different, and the radiator shrouds will look yellow once the graphics are on. As you can see, I'm missing the levers right now because I just took them as spares when I went riding on the CRF. And you can see here that there's a speedo wire, and you'll see how that's all set up in the next episode.